Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural, the latest episode of Legacies, as well as the latest episode of Evil. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below, include a time I'm going to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I have to say about this week's episode of Legacies, and/or skip to what I have to say about this week's episode of Evil. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supernatural. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, they're kind of up against the wire. The crew has to, deal with these ghosts, and the barrier is slowly falling down. They do come up with kind of like a one last ditch effort plan, and it's to basically use this horn by of Lilith's to basically call in all the spirits and demons to basically return them all to hell. Well, more so the spirits than anything, but the way he makes it, the way Belphegor makes it sound later on, it's almost like demons as well. But regardless, it's mainly about sucking down all the spirits, and because initially Rowena had a different plan of okay, let's do this, but it was just too much. There's too many benevolent spirits and they're evil, and then bashing against the barrier that's already so weakened, it was just too much. And even she started to lose hope, and oh my god, this is it, we're all dead. It's it's the end of everything, but obviously the others aren't willing to give up, and I doubt it was kind of a sweet moment of Sam being it's okay, you need a break, it's okay, he's trying to give Rowena her space. But obviously Dean's kind of a little antsy, because for him it's this can't be it, this is supposed to be our chance to kind of fight back. We can't let Chuck's Armageddon kind of be the end of everything. After everything they've been through, this is how it goes down. I even love you can almost look at it as almost like an inside joke of really literally after every cataclysmic Armageddon that's come our way, it's going to be a whole bunch of evil spirits that take us down. Really, that's kind of the vibe they kind of went with, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Because for Dean, he's not willing to give up. It's because for him, he's still being the fact of the matter is, I'm pissed because it's this is it. We do this. This was Chuck's one last shot. So it's we take care of this, we're home free, essentially. So, but then there was a page in the book. If you look at Rowena's book, what she was looking at, and I saw a page and outline, I'm that looked like that was an anatomy of a person. I'm are you thinking what I'm? But she was no, there's nothing in this that can help. I'm oh, did she come upon a spell but didn't want to say anything? Is she reluctant to do it? But it's we'll get to that soon enough. But there's a lot of things that kind of be broken down. First and foremost, we have Belphegor and Cass going to hell and everything. I even love, it probably made Cass feel a little good pushing him down the pit to the portal to hell, because it's there's no staircase, so how do we go there? Push them in and then jump in afterwards. Because the plan is to use the horn to suck all the ghosts in. Then they're going to use the spell that Rowena trying to come up with to close the pit to hell, close this gaping wound, heal it in a sense, so that it closes, and hopefully Cass gets out beforehand, because the last thing you want to do is be stuck in hell, especially being an angel and stuff like that. It's actually interesting because when they're going down those steps at first, it kind of reminded me of a little bit of how aesthetically hell looks like in Lucifer, because we only get we don't get the grand tour, but we get a general overlook of just the stones and stuff like that, the black rock mark. It looked reminiscent of that. I mean, obviously anytime we've ever seen hell, it's always been cells or the actual throne room. It's typically what we've mainly seen of hell. So but it was just aesthetically, the walls just kind of reminded me of Lucifer, the TV show, a little bit. Regardless, going a bit of a tangent, but also, there's our dead situation, her killing Ketch. I was what? For one, on many different levels. One, I'm Rowena and Ketch never had their moment. I was it was there. And it's they never got their chance. I figured that as much the moment Ketch died. I was I almost halfway expecting them to, well, to be fair, I don't think Ketch, well, because it also depends. Well, Ketch came back to life, but who knows if he actually went to hell or not. Because that was the whole thing. It's if you go to hell, you can't go to heaven, and heaven won't accept your soul. It's been damned before. So it's I don't know if Ketch would go to heaven after everything that he's done, but he turned things around. He became a good guy in the end. So, and it just sucks, because it's Ardet was kind of oh, you're not going to tell me where Belphegor is, because it meant giving up the people he cares about. Despite everything, you wouldn't think he is, but Ketch is an honorable man, and it's like these guys have become allies and friends to him. So it's like he wasn't willing to put Sam, Dean, and Cass in that same situation, even if it was after Belphegor, especially what they were up against. It's like, I can't have you going after Belphegor now, especially because they're trying to save so many lives, putting all these spirits back in hell and everything, you know? She rips out his heart, dude. I'm like, well, he came back. Well, it's like, well, he found a way to come back from death before, but that was different circumstances, so he had to make a deal before him, so I don't think there's any getting around that. We might see something. I'll kind of circle back to it in a little bit, but we'll see. So now that's happening, but you know, Ardette shows up in hell, and she's like, do you not know who he is, what he's doing? Like, the fact is, he's always groveled at everyone's feet, whether it be Lilith or whether it be, you know, Crowley. He's always waiting for his opportunity. Like, that's what this is all about for Belphegor. He says he wants hell to kind of go back to the way it was, but it's because for him, he wants to rule hell, even though he kept claiming he didn't want to. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, he doesn't want to rule hell. He just wants to, well, maybe that was his initial plan, but now he has the opportunity to grow so much more, I guess, because at first it seems like it's his circumstances like, oh, I can be king of hell, because once again, we haven't seen anyone on a throne since Asmodeus. He was the last one we've seen on a throne. So, you know, we hear, like I said, like we didn't get a peek into what's going on in hell at all last season. So there's that whole circumstance. But then, which that's still another angle that has to be brought up too. Because like, well, I'm skipping around, but the thing is, everything gets concluded. Like I said, I'll circle back around, but it's like, who else got out of hell in that time? What about Michael? Is he free? Like, we don't know the grand scale of that jailbreak. We know a lot of spirits got put back and stuff like that, but who's to say the cell wasn't open long enough for Michael to slip out, you know? So that's a whole thing, which once again, this would be an opportunity to bring back Adam in some shape or form, and even though he hasn't been in the story for many, many years, you know, so, because the actor who played Adam, the most recent thing I saw him in was on the Netflix show Another Life. I'm blanking on his, it's Sasha, that was his character's name, it's that actor. I believe that's the same actor. I'm pretty sure I'm not being crazy about it. I'm pretty sure that's the same actor, but regardless, tangent and all that. So it's up to Castiel, you know, to stop Belphegor when he starts sucking down all the souls, because he's like, oh, because there'll be nothing more powerful than me, no one. I'll be stronger than Lilith and everyone. The fact of the matter is, I'll be like a god. Well, not really, but as you say, there's an opening position, which is like, oh, that would have been interesting, like, what that would have really looked like. I was like, oh, are we setting him up to be like the main antagonist now or something like that? But Castiel deals with that immediately, and he's like, wait, it's me, Cass, it's Jack, and he's like, you're not going to fool me, and he burns him. Like, he didn't just stop with just killing Belphegor, he burned Jack's body, and I was like, oh, man, that sucks, and that has to suck to do, because, well, Dean gives him so much shit later on because it's like everything that goes down, because obviously he's still pissed about the Mary thing. Like, Cass has made mistakes in the past before, but the fact of the matter is he's always done things with the, you know, doing the best, which once again, it's like, you can't really be the judge. You've screwed up in so many different regards. Once again, you know, things happen. Belphegor brought up one of your mistakes, and that was torturing people in hell. Like, you didn't do it at first, but eventually you broke and did. So it's just like, people make mistakes. And in this case, it wasn't him making a mistake. It was him dealing with a situation right now. Belphegor would have been on some god level power, essentially. And the last thing you want is him just out there with powers like that, a demon, let alone with powers like that. But Dean was kind of like, oh, we would have found a way to deal with it. But it's like, he just wasn't willing to give, you know, Castiel a chance. But, you know, he just wasn't cutting him any slack. But at the same time, it's like, but he also, going as far as he did, he had to burn Jack's body like that, which is like, I guess in a sense, almost like giving him a hunter's funeral without actually being able to give him a hunter's funeral, because everything went down. Or at least you could burn your mom's body. Yes, it's a whole circumstances of like a copy was made and stuff like, regardless, you were able to give your mom a hunter's funeral. He wasn't even able to give Jack one. I guess maybe that's the argument. It could be that that was his version of it, but he still had to leave like all of that, like the charred remains behind. But I think it was more so than anything to make sure that no other demon ended up possessing Jack's body. I believe that was kind of the main point that they were trying to get across, you know? So that's what I chalked it up to. But I'm like, that had to be rough. Doing that to the person he considered a son, you know? It's like, I think that in itself speaks a lot of volumes, but I don't think Dean's thinking about that, because for him, it's like, what matters most is like, you didn't go along with the plan. We would have found another way. But it's like, he dealt with the situation as it was presented to him. Like, he was supposed to just let Belphegor get all this power and stuff. Like, so that's, it's just shitty on Dean's part to kind of, I get it. He's pissed and everything. He has a right to be, but it is even that thing of Belphegor kind of points out. It's like, oh, like, someone's supposed to go down there, and Dean was like, all right, send Cass. It's like you weren't even worried. Like you didn't even give Cassiel the chance to volunteer for it. You kind of threw him under the bus. Like, yeah, send him. I don't give a, you don't give a shit what happens to him. Even to the point he's like, oh, Sam doesn't care about what happens to you either, which is like, I don't know. I feel like that's more so on Dean's side of things than Sam. Like, I don't think Sam holds that grudge against Cassiel like that, but maybe he does. I don't know. I think he understands under those, circumstances. Like, he's not as pissed as Dean is about the whole situation. Maybe he is, but I feel like he's not as verbal about it at the very least as Dean is. But when it comes down to it, the horn being stopped, it's like the wound that, the hell is closing up to. So it's like, okay, so what do we do? Rowena was like, this was always your plan, but I always had my own. And it was like, she's going to sacrifice herself. She even takes out that last resurrection thing because she's not going to need it where she's going, which that could potentially be used on a catch situation, but I don't know. I don't know if they're going to necessarily utilize that. They made a point to point that out, that she is removing it, but I guess it's the point that, there is no coming back for her in many different regards. So there's that, but I don't know. I wonder if they're going to use that in some shape or form. Maybe, maybe not. But Rowena is pushing Sam to be the one. And I was like, because the moment she saw that outline of bodies, like that in the book, I was like, she's going to sacrifice herself. And it's like, for her, she's like, I can't even do it myself because I don't care enough about you, your brother, or this world. So I need you to be able to want to kind of do it. Because it, like, Destiny kind of says that it's going to end up like this anyway. But Sam's like, I don't want to. I kind of always felt like at the end of the day, like, because I thought about this last season, and that was my theory, that like Rowena would be sacrificed. I figured that's how her story would play out, that Sam would kill her, not just to kill her, but to, for the greater good type of, it'd be a sacrifice, and I only felt like that because I thought that would be a means to, fixing Jack's situation last season. That's what I was kind of thinking about, but yeah, it's so sad too because I was gushing so much about Rowena, slash, Ruth Connell, the actress who plays Rowena. I was gushing so much last episode just for things to kind of be this way. I kind of caught a glimpse of this preview. Like, it was more so just a look at Rowena's face that I was kind of like, but it was like, because I was avoiding looking at the previews for like, this episode last week. And I was like, oh, don't tell me they're setting that. But it's like, I wasn't expecting them to hit this storyline this early in the season. I was like, holy shit, that sucks. Because it isn't just like a regular sacrifice in the sense of like, basically she's going to absorb all the spirits and then basically is going to make her body crumble, hence why she was like, there's no coming back from that. Like, at the very least, if her body's in some shape or form, she can still manage to come back, but this would mean breaking down her body completely. So she pushes Sam to do it, and he's like, that's my boy. And it's like, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'll start welling up. I was like, nah, man, I had to fight back the tears, man. I had to fight back the tears. You have Sam crying, you have her crying, and her like, that's my boy. And I'm like, no, Rowena, after everything. It's like, you weren't always a good guy, but come on, dude. It's like the Crowley situation all over again, of like the bad guy turning good, and it's just like, no. Like I said, I gushed over her so much last episode, and now it's just like, this happens literally in the next episode. That just, I don't know, it's so heartbreaking. And the fact is, she says goodbye to the boys and, goes into the pit, just, and it's like, I think Rowena didn't give herself enough credit, because it's like, you say that, but I think there is a part of you that does care enough. You care about Sam, you care about Dean, you care about Castiel, There's some part of me in some way that kind of hopes that her and Ketch met up. I don't know. Like, I think it'd be neat because they never had their moment last episode. I thought it'd be kind of neat for them to potentially have their moment in the future. But like I said, I could be just going, I don't know, man. I want there to be some silver lining to that situation. And, now because Sam feels bad because it's like, especially him, because him and Rowena created a bond of like, knowing like where things going to end up, that one day Sam will kill her. The fact of the matter is she was always so, out of anyone, she was close to Sam. And it was just kind of like, it's just, like I said, just so much stuff was hinting to it. The fact is she was like, oh no, I want Samuel Beatty here to help me with the spell. It's like, you're very good along the magic side of things. And I'm like, you had your ulterior motives at that time. I knew it. And it's just, and she ends up saving the day. Like, this victory was more so Rowena's than anyone else's. But I'm sure even for Sam, it's like, this doesn't feel like a victory. Rowena had to die for that. But it's like, hey, once again, Dean, it's like Chuck's little Hail Mary. It didn't work out. So it works out in the end that we win, So we don't have to, we got the free will and everything. But it's like, does it matter? Because now it's like, well, they learned about Ketch's death. Now this is just all hitting them all at once. It's like, Jesus, like we felt like we won today, but we lost at the same time, Which we know Chuck's circumstances of him being stuck here on Earth because Amara won't help him leave. Stuck on this particular Earth, So that's kind of a sad, not sad situation in that regard. Sad for him, but for everyone else, it's an opportunity to pay him back for everything that they've basically been through. So they have an opportunity. Well, we do know that he's still on Earth, but losing his powers, but he still is powerful enough to probably do some damage. So he knows that Sam and Dean might come after him, so he probably is going to aim for a situation of, let me take them out before they take me out type of, we'll see in that regard. But, yeah, man, that's heavy. And also, like I said, I'm sure they also recognize the fact that they're not going to be able to give Jack a proper burial because, like I said, his bones and stuff are still there in hell. Which there's a part of me wondering, did Belphegor get enough souls in him to make it so like, oh, I'm not going to die, like I end up resurrecting or something? I think he probably absorbed enough, but not enough to be fully powered. So Cassio was still able to kind of overpower and kill him, especially because he was intent enough of like, I need to put you down because you are an abomination that's defiling Jack's body. Plus you are using us, manipulating us, but still. And then on top of all that, there's the whole situation with, Castiel and Dean, and Dean's just, Castiel's like, the fact is you won't even look at me. You can't even look at me anymore. The fact of the matter is, you have your brother. He kind of has no one right now because he's lost Jack and he's just lost any reason to stay here anymore because he doesn't feel that family bond anymore because it's like, you can't look past the whole Mary situation and you're blaming me for like, oh, what went down, even Rowena's death. Like the fact is Rowena accepted the sacrifice, but I guess even on Dean's part, it's just, for him, it's just like, yeah, things go wrong, plans change, but why does it seem like every time lately, it's like, you're the reason why everything goes wrong. So it's just, it's, like I said, you feel bad for Cassio because it's like I said, everyone's screwed up in their own right. Like no one's kind of avoided screw ups, but it's just because this particular circumstance led to your mom dying. It's like, what about the person that he cared about most in this world? Jack. What about the fact is that you were willing to kill him? And the fact is he could, so that there's layers to the whole thing. So it's kind of like I said, just a sad, sucky situation all around. And Cassio was like, I tried to tell you about my powers waning, but you won't listen. You haven't been listening at all, which I think that in itself is a key sign that, he hasn't been paying attention because it's like Cassio losing his powers means I think that Chuck is too. Like, I think all angels are going to be losing their abilities. I think angels are all going to revert to becoming humans at the end of the day. So Cassio might just be a pure human going forward. Maybe the same thing applies to the rest. I mean, and at least one angel is on Earth that we are, aware of, and that's Joe. We haven't seen her since like early last season. I think was like the last time we saw her. So she's still kicking it somewhere on Earth. But then there's all those other, angels as well, the few that remain. So I'm also curious to see, are we going to look at the Hell situation to find out, like, who's going to be taking over the throne and stuff like that? I mean, Lilith's crypt was kind of ransacked, so that might be something we see, that we might see some demons on Earth running around with some of her stuff. There was even that friend of Belphegors that had that ring on or whatever. It was supposed to be, I don't know, it seemed like, oh, is that this? And it's like, oh yeah, but Castiel ended up killing him beforehand. I wasn't expecting him to just like randomly just like stab the dude like that. I was like, oh, I guess it's kind of like, well, we don't have time for chit chat. Let's get down to business and find this horn. So, which also the horn's going to, so no using that in the future. But I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to see kind of, because I was thinking about it in retrospect, but like there have been like, you know, arcs over the course of like early day seasons, you know, you get what I'm trying to say. But I'm curious, like this whole arc has been wrapped up for now, but it's not over yet, you know. So I'm curious to see where they go going forward, because it's like, oh, they think they've won, but once again they've lost too, and it's like dealing with that win/loss going forward. No Cassio, no Rowena, no Ketch, no Mom. You know, so it's like, what are you going to do? Because they're under the assumption Chuck bounced, but I wonder who's going to let them know that he hasn't, like what's going to happen in that regard. I'm so curious to see where we go. We still got a long ways down the road for, you know, to the end of this season. So there's a lot that could go down, a lot of surprises, I feel like. So I can't wait to see where all this ends up ultimately taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legacies. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we kind of get a more proper introduction to our new sheriff, which in the grand scheme of things, I guess it makes sense that she's sheriff, the badge and everything. But I guess in my head, I was just thinking like, oh, she was just going to be like a new cop or whatever. But it's like, no, she's replacing Matt, which is interesting because you wouldn't think Matt would leave just because, well, he wants to keep the balance between the supernatural and the humans. I mean, obviously he's very like anti-supernatural now. He'll make it seem like he's not, but he basically is. Obviously, we know he's been like that for a while now, but still, you wouldn't think he'd leave it to someone else, because it seems like she's unaware about the supernatural. I mean, at least it seems like that. It might be that she was informed by Matt, because you would think his replacement would know, not unless there's other circumstances why Matt's not around. I mean, there could be stuff, but I don't know if the show's actually going to dive into that or not. So what's interesting is we end up finding out she's Maya and Ethan's mom, which didn't even know they were siblings, so that's interesting too. So but I'm curious, because obviously, like I brought up, like we know Matt's the very like anti-supernatural, but I'm kind of wondering, is she going to be the new Liz? Because Liz, you know, might have started, no, especially having Damon Salvatore as a best buddy. It's like, you know, I think she let a lot of stuff slide. Like obviously Matt just, you know, Matt had his own approach to everything. So I'm wondering, is she going to be more of a Liz or is she going to be more of a Matt? It's going to be interesting to kind of see that. But along with all of that, basically, there's a kind of douchey kid that went missing. So now it's a whole thing of like, all right, so something supernatural might have gotten him because he disappeared into Salvatore school and stuff like that. So it's like Hope and Alark investigate, and they know the best way to do that is through the football game, which obviously he's the head coach in this situation, and she's basically supposed to be set up to be the quarterback because Ethan's trying not to, because he's trying to get a scholarship, so he's not trying to get injured or anything like that, you know, so, or something like it was, I think it was something that nature of why like he didn't want to play at the beginning. But regardless, the moment they get there, they learn that, oh, the kid is actually okay, but it turns out the thing that attacked him, what's interesting is it eats werewolves, which I'm like, that's interesting, you know, because you almost like you'd border, because you think like, oh, something that actually eats vampires and werewolves, that doesn't seem, because those are they're the apex predators in this universe sort of thing. I mean, to be fair, there's plenty of things big enough to kill them, but just a straight up like, oh no, I don't eat anything unless it's werewolves. It's just kind of an interesting situation, which begs the question, it's like, right, Raphael's out there somewhere, so it's like, right, we're going to have to worry about that situation while also balancing the game, which everyone at the Salvatore school, our new headmaster, is telling them like, hey, go nuts, you don't have to hold back anymore. My predecessor told you to kind of hold back, but it's like, no, you're superior to them. It's like, obviously kind of do things in moderation, but hey, kind of go nuts essentially. So they easily kind of stomped the competition at first. Now, what I thought was fascinating is obviously Josie is pushing to be like, yo, like what's going on? Like, let's go full throttle with everything, full throttle. But you have Caleb being the one that's like, yeah, it felt good to stomp them, but maybe we should pull back. It's like, Caleb, out of anyone is telling us to like kind of go down in moderations, and even he's like, your dad was right, and you know how much it hurt to me to kind of admit that, but it's like, yeah, like it's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is he was right, like that he was like, it felt good at first, but now it kind of feels slimy just winning this way. So it's like, oh, some growth on Caleb's part too. I mean, to be fair, we saw him grow over the course of season 1, so I think we've continued to see that growth. But it's interesting that out of anyone else, because normally Josie would be kind of like the voice of reason in certain regards like this. But it's because like there's something inside of her that's just like, no, I want to win, I want to win, I want to win. Especially because she sees Hope, and she gets super pissed because it's like, wait, you know that girl? And Linda's like, yeah, we shared a milkshake, and it's like, oh, and then once again, it's like, it's so interesting because like I expect that, like legitimately, that seems like Lizzie behavior, not Josie behavior, like being all jealous like that. She's like, I want to crush her. It's like, what, you're afraid to hit her? She's not afraid to hit on you. And Linda's like, oh, okay, because even he was like, isn't that being a little aggressive that you want to just like get everyone to kind of tackle her? And then even like Josie's looking at her and Hope's like, all right, that was aggressive. So it's like, it's interesting. Like I brought it up before, I think we're definitely going to be seeing like a much darker side to Josie. Because at first I was thinking, chalking it up to the fact is that for Josie, it's like the fact is she's always kind of had to look after other people. So now it's just like, nah, I'm not going to worry about other people. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to look after my own best interests. So I thought it was kind of that. But then part of me's wondering, this must have something to do with the merge, just because it's not just Josie that's acting a little differently. We even see it with Lizzie as well, because it ends up being this very interesting situation of, obviously she's very focused on figuring out who Sebastian is and all that, and obviously MG wants to help and everything, which is actually kind of a sad situation, because even after circumstances of last episode, because he's still hoping, like, wait, she's still all about saying yes, so if things don't work out with Sebastian, she'll say yes to the first person who actually asked her out, so he's going to probably try and muster the courage. So it's almost just kind of like this, oh, you're trying to aim for someone that, like, the fact is, I don't know, you see moments of her looking at him in a certain way that she might not have before, where she kind of like, oh, you're actually a great dude, I don't know what I'd do without you, but it's probably more so in a friendship way. But I think maybe that'll be the point with this whole situation, is she will start seeing him in a different light. But then there's the whole thing where we end up finding out, like, they make it clear at first of like, wait, she's the only one that sees him, because she looks at him because he's over there watching them play, and he waves at her and she waves back, and then MG turns, he's not there. So it's like, oh, so Lizzie's the only one that can see him. What's also interesting too is he's a vampire, which my mind immediately goes to a certain area of like, could he be a ghost? Because remember, like, there was a whole situation with Jeremy where Jeremy could see ghosts. He was like the only person who could. So I wonder, is it a similar situation in that same regard of like, because I was wondering, it's like, not less it's supposed to be the thing of like, Lizzie might be a little crazy because that's something they've kind of set up, but I was thinking like, that could be where they're making the storyline seem like, oh, she is crazy, but maybe she's able to see certain things. I mean, who knows? I doubt it. I mean, it could always, you never know. It could be like the aftermath of like that Jin situation last season. I doubt it, but, well, because Jeremy's situation came about because he died and came back. It's just like it's a normal human being. So it's like he started seeing ghosts, and he was like the only character in the series that's ever been able to do that, to my knowledge, actually see ghosts. Maybe witches can, but no, because Bonnie and them never could see the way he could, right? It's been a while, but yeah, I'm pretty certain he's the only one that could. And we know, like, well, because we know that the other side had collapsed, but obviously there's some form of other side, as we know in the Vampire Diaries, because obviously that's where Stefan met up with Lexi, and that's kind of where everyone ultimately got reunited at the end of the Vampire Diaries, which was like super, super far in the future of like, oh yeah, like everyone's kind of moved on and reunited type of thing. But I'm like, I don't know, it just kind of got my mind wondering. I think that's the angle they're going to go down. Like, she's able to see the other side, and maybe, maybe it's something special about each one of them. Maybe that's something only Lizzie can do. But the question is, are there extenuating circumstances why she can do that, or what? Or is it just going to be legitimately that she's crazy? I don't think so. Just the fact is, it's this person ends up being a vampire too. I'm like, that seems like that's more in line. And he's also saying like, oh, we can never be together, which I'm like, oh, just because, maybe your subconscious being like, oh, I'm all in your head, maybe that. But I'm like, no, because he knows what his situation is, but Lizzie doesn't, so. Like I said, that's interesting because the ghost angle isn't something that obviously it popped up in the originals, but that was more so because of, then to be fair, like Klaus would always see, Cammy and whatnot, under certain circumstances, but that could have just been, obviously she represented kind of the more good nature of his subconscious. Maybe that or something like they fiddle with that so much that it's like it's hard to say whether that's 100% in someone's mind or whether there's a supernatural side to that whole situation. But regardless, that's kind of an interesting development. And like I said, playing into the angle of maybe that's just all in her head. You do have MG being the one that sees her kind of making out with Sebastian, but obviously it's just her making out with someone that's not there. So there's that. Obviously, kind of continuing the angle of like going back to the whole Josie situation of it seems like the headmaster is pushing her down that route. The question is he doing that on purpose or is she a means to an end, but he is unintentionally pushing her towards like a darker side? It might be because the fact is he recognizes how powerful she is, and the fact of the matter is that might be set up for their story too. Like, because I brought it up before, I think out of anyone, Josie's going to be the one who wins. I mean, obviously in the alternate timeline that was created because of the whole Jen situation, it was actually Lizzie who won, but part of me wonders they're setting it up to be like, no, Josie's going to be the one to win. Ultimately, we'll have to wait and see in that regard. But the fact is that she does, like I said, that darker side of her comes out. Then when the headmaster kind of pushes her to be like, hey, you should do this, she uses a spell and breaks Ethan's arm, which is like, that's totally not her. And obviously you can tell, like, Alaric isn't too happy about it. It's like, yo, that's my daughter, you're pushing it. It's like, oh, but you've let her down and blah 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 blah. It's kind of what the new headmaster is saying. Because even Alaric's like, yeah, you're definitely up to something. Because it's like you're shady, and I don't know what you're doing and why you're doing this. So that's a whole angle to this whole thing. Because it seems like out of anyone he's taken, I mean, he says he's reaching out for other students, but the only one he's paid so much attention to right now is Josie. I mean, I guess we'll eventually find out. I wonder, is it just witches? I mean, it seems like, he's aiming for witches, but I'm like, it seems like, I don't know. Well, because they're saying that Caroline handpicked him herself, so it's like, did he kind of fool her into thinking like, oh, he was someone that he's not, or maybe the person she hired ended up getting replaced by whoever this really is. It could be like, I don't know what to make of it. Like I said, there's a lot to that whole situation. Obviously, there's a whole thing of Hope trying to help out Raphael because it's like, oh, that creature's out there that eats werewolves, so let me help out. And so she goes into her room, and I love that she's like, has to stop herself because she's going through Landon's stuff. She's like, no, stop. And so she goes through Rap's stuff, and she's performing a spell, and Landon catches her. I thought that was kind of interesting circumstances, and she freezes him. It's like, wait, you can help, and kind of having to explain everything without explaining everything. So, and even when they're walking and stuff like that, like Landon doesn't pick up on it, but we pick up on it when it's like Landon's like, oh, there's nothing. She's like, which means there's something. She knows him so well because it's the thing of like him being like, oh, it's nothing. It's like, no, it is something. So tell me. So he doesn't pick up on it, but obviously we as the audience do. So I thought that was kind of a neat situation. I even love her. At first she was like, all right, I'm gonna have to distract him. I'm like, why are you gonna distract him? And she's like, I gotta get naked. I was like, well, it's like, right, I legitimately forgot she's a wolf. Because it doesn't come, like, once again, it's kind of like the whole, yeah, you recognize her as a tribrid, but you kind of forget. It's like, all right, one, you haven't died yet, so you haven't activated your vampire side. You have activated your wolf side because that was your way to try and get access to more of your power and stuff like that. I was like, right, because that was a whole thing she went through last season, was like kind of unlocking her wolf side, So I'd completely, because she accidentally killed that dude and activated her curse when she was dealing with the hollow inside of her, So I totally forgot about that situation. So there's that. So sadly, it seems like this thing was more interested in Landon than it was going after her. So it's like, so it does seem like Landon is still the key to everything because his powers as a phoenix are going to be what's necessary for Malivore to kind of end up returning. So it's like, yes, he's like, so he's still like, I think even though the creatures have their own instincts, so like, oh, let me hunt down werewolves. The fact is it didn't go after Hope because Landon is more important, and Landon trumps whatever your instincts are, because Malivore is controlling them and pushing them. They're very, like, where it was all about, I mean, it's the same thing as season 1, where it's like we're just going about it a different way rather than getting the things necessary to unlock Malivore, which you can make the argument Landon is kind of like the final key and all of that, but still, it's kind of interesting. And luckily, Hope was able to kind of help Raph. It's like, right, she didn't even know he was under those circumstances, because that all went down when she was dealing with Malivore, so she hadn't heard about it until Alaric had brought it up, so. But luckily, she was able to break. Part of me was wondering, is there a part of Raphael that might not be affected? Just a part of me was thinking, like, maybe because he was in wolf form, his wolf brain was kind of activated, so his human brain wasn't. So it's kind of like, oh no, it wasn't going to, affect his memories, but totally, he doesn't remember Hope at all either, so. But like I said, it's interesting because, like, the only person, and I wonder, is it because he's a Phoenix, or is it just because of their connection? But he is the only one that has any semblance of memory of Hope. Like, obviously, we see tidbits there with, like, Alaric, but I think that's because out of anyone, Alaric and, like, but I don't think he remembers to the level that Landon can, because he was getting glimpses of her, But maybe that's something specific to him, because I think, I think dying just kind of, and this is something, I'm making another Kingdom Hearts reference. The lane between sleep and death there's kind of overlap in certain regards. Like, I'm talking about in like a fictitious sense. I don't know if that's a realistic thing or not, but just from the fictitious standpoint of like a Kingdom Hearts, they kind of like borderline that, like the lines between sleep and death are kind of close. So you kind of have a tendency to kind of slip over into the other one from time to time. So I think that's what's leading Landon to remember. But I think he's able to benefit from it because he's a Phoenix and can come back from death. So it's not, so I don't know. I just thought that was kind of an interesting circumstance. But also, I didn't talk about it, but I like the fact is that headmaster was talking so much shit that like Alaric like punched him, and that led to a brawl. And I love you go to the bus later on, and just like all the students are like messed up. Josie wanted to talk to her dad, which now the headmaster's telling her, it's like, oh, you can't talk to neither one of your daughters because you failed them before, and the fact of the matter is you'll do more harm than good by being around them. It's like, these are my daughters. Yeah, and look at what a bang up job you did, because he's like, oh, I'm done, because everything I've done has always been to protect the people at this school, which obviously the headmaster's like, oh, like he's definitely got his own agenda, which we see at the end there. He's eating that thing, which is like, okay, so I'm assuming you are the person in the red cloak or whatever that sacrificed to do, like, so like you are connected to Malivore, like, are you the one that's actually Clark but in a new body, or like are you just trying to bring back Malivore for different reasons, or are you actually Malivore itself? Because it almost seems like he goes out of his way to kind of praise Landon, so that's why I'm wondering, is that actually Malivore itself? Like, did it actually get free? But it's like, I don't know. That's what I'm kind of confused about. Well, what's interesting is like he opened up his mouth like that, he was eating it, so like, well, Malivore just pulled things in, but maybe now, like, it just straight up devours things. Maybe in the form it's in now, it's like, oh, I don't need, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I'm probably, like, reaching too far. I'm probably thinking, like, too much ahead of, like, that's what this is, and I'm probably, like, super wrong, but still, it's just interesting. It kind of reminds me of Umpiers from Hemlock Grove, because they would do that thing in particular. Oh, jeez, I'm blanking on his character's name. Bill Skarsgård's character in Jesus, I don't remember his name now. Oh, it's gonna bother the crap out of me. Roman, that's it. It kind of reminds me, because like Roman would do it. I don't know if his mom would necessarily do it. I don't remember. Like, you definitely see Roman do it, the whole like unclenching his jaw and it stretches like abnormally big like that. But the thing is, Umpirs are just vampires. That was just that universe's, because I think like vampires are derived from Umpirs. It's just like, it's from a different language. So it's literally the same thing, but it's like, so he's not, because he's definitely not a vampire. So, I mean, not unless he's like some other ancient form of a vampire or something. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, because I feel like we know all there is to know about the history of vampires. So if there was another branch to that whole situation, whether it be everything with Silas or the originals, so ultimately we'll have to wait and see. But he's definitely something else. you would assume he has to be something from Malivore. Maybe that could be it. Maybe he's meant to eat things for Malivore and bring them back or something. Maybe that's how he's gathering power or something. I don't know. Like I said, I'm still under the impression that he might be pretending to be. Because I was like, he might have put up a good front to be like, oh, like, I'm this well-educated person, blah, 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 blah. Hence why Caroline hired him. But it could be, once again, she hired a different person. But he, whatever this thing is, ate him and disguised itself as him, or just straight up killed him and decided, whatever the case may be. We'll see. Obviously, the new adjustments are not 100% set in because Raphael's sleeping on the floor and it's very reminiscent. I think, because Hope wasn't even she was a baby at that time. Because I was about to say, because like her mom literally went through that. Well, her and Jackson, because everything that Klaus did working with their aunt, to basically trap them in wolf form from like season 2's finale to, I think it was like, was it season 2's actual finale or was it like the episode before the season 2 finale? Whatever the case, that borderline between season 2 and season 3, like they were stuck in that form for a while. And I think Raphael is still kind of getting adjusted, and Landon being there to kind of look after him. Obviously everything with Josie kind of being like, she's going to talk about the fact that she's going to help out Landon figure this situation, plus about Hope, because it's like, yeah, there's more to her than she says, so you are right about that, which is like, oh, that's going to lead down a tricky road, just because it's like, oh yeah, once again, you're caught between the girl that you care for right now heavily, and that's Josie, but then also the girl that you fell in love with. That's going to be a super complicated love triangle situation. Might even get more complicated because Raphael's back and it's like, oh, you have no memory, so there might be something there. Maybe not. I don't know. Almost seems like Hope is also trying to make the best of her situation too, because it's like, well, the life she had to leave behind, she is kind of almost in a way moving on. So I think, because she's there for Maya, after Ethan's arm situation, and it's like that kind of blows, not unless she tries to heal him, but that might be a thing that she probably tries not to go down that route. We're kind of mixing the normal world with the supernatural world in that regard, because it probably is going to cause a lot more trouble and attention than you want. So, I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot to kind of process from this episode, and I'm kind of, interested to ultimately see where it all ends up taking us going forward. And now moving on to this week's episode of Evil. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. All right, this show just keeps getting better and better and twisty with every new episode. Obviously, like, Kristen gets called in for it's kind of interesting because, like, obviously there's a continuation of her youngest Laura, like the whole heart condition thing, obviously that being a continuous storyline. But on top of that, obviously she gets called in by David because David needs her help with basically an assessment from like 3 months ago. They're currently in a process of doing an exorcism, but now it's the whole thing of like, well, we might need someone's medical professional point of view to see whether this really is demonic possession or is this something psychological. It's this woman named Caroline, and obviously, and that's so interesting too, seeing like during this whole process people wearing shades and stuff like that, because you don't want to make eye contact with the demon. I guess maybe it can like possess you or kind of draw you in even more if you make eye contact, but nevertheless, what made this situation so great, and I say great in a very horrible, under the very horrible circumstances, but like she's bleeding, she's vomiting, and it's like, and it turns into that thing, because obviously Kristen's like, okay, like, what are some, like, obviously it's like, oh, some people are saying schizophrenia, another medical professional was saying, what was it, dissociative personality disorder, another person was calling her a bipolar. Like, no one was concrete on what their diagnosis of her situation was. And just under these circumstances, obviously Kristen's pushing more so for like, oh, we need, a professional here, because there's people with medical training there, but they're from the church. So in Kristen's mind, it's like, you're already going to be biased. Yeah, you're medical professionals, but we need a professional who's going to look at this from a scientific point of view and not from a religious point of view. Yeah, you'll be there to kind of check on her, but you'll be thinking like, oh, this and that's, something, demonic or supernatural. So she brings in Kurt, which they went with a very like Exorcist aesthetic of like the way he entered. I think that was kind of like the whole point too, but I just thought it was kind of neat how they like shot it like that, of it, the car rolling up him in a hat and everything. So there's that. obviously from his medical perspective, it's like her schizophrenia. But the thing is, David starts thinking it might be more possession because it ends up being a circumstances of she brings up his visions, even the 3 points being like, oh, your dreams aren't visions from heaven, they're from hell. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So obviously David, like, you know, it's like he hasn't told that to really anyone. He hasn't brought up the whole vision stuff. So it's like, how does she know about that? The 3 stars, that is a little suspicious. But then obviously Kristen and Kurt are like, no, this is like psychological. And it's so good because like before now, it's always been like they've always met in the middle. This is the biggest like divide between the psychological and the supernatural side of things, because it's like Kristen and Kurt are firm, like they're firm, they stand with their assessment of like this is something psychological. They, on the other hand, the church believes this to be supernatural. It's like, oh, but Kristen like, oh, I replaced the holy water with tap water, and she's having the same reaction. But it's like, oh no, because as long as it's coming from God, I believed it to be holy water, so holy power, which is like when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it is almost kind of like that is almost you shifting the narrative to fit your own perspective, which David kind of throws that at Kristen as well. So it's just, like I said, seeing this huge divide. Eventually it was going to come up, but like, this is like the biggest divide. I'm so curious what Ben's perspective was, because obviously Ben was doing his thing this episode. You know, we'll circle back to that soon enough, but I just thought that was such a fascinating aspect to this. And just, it's really interesting too, because like by the time everything does ultimately end up getting resolved, because at first you're like, is this demonic possession? Is this schizophrenia? Like that's the thing, you don't know in many different regards. This is one of those circumstances where it seemed like it was full-blown demonic possession, because at first she's talking about, you know, she says stuff in a different language and she's referencing the 60 again and again. That keeps coming up. We're still not fully aware what that entirely entails. So there's that whole thing. But David's like, the fact is you're stronger than them. And it's like, oh, he's coming for you. And it's like, whoa, tell him to let you go. I'm thinking referencing specifically Leland. That might be kind of what Caroline was kind of referencing. But then she kind of closes her eye. Her eye was kind of like reddish and stuff like that. And then she opens her upper eyes again and they're clear. And it's like, okay, there was definitely something supernatural. Because even Kurt kind of takes off the shades and it's like, what the fuck? You know, even from he's like, I think even from a scientific perspective, it's like, I can't explain what the hell just happened there, because it almost seemed like she was a different person. I mean, maybe you can make the argument like, oh, there was the whole angle of like her schizophrenia breaking, but you know, like it's not, I think it's not that easy I don't know, like I'm not well versed in understanding what schizophrenia is, what it 100% entails, but I would assume, it's just assumption, I guess it's not that easy to break the delusion once it's started. Like it's kind of a continuous thing, maybe, especially because it's not like she got medication for anything. It's just 1 minute she's in this quote unquote, you know, delusion, and then next she's out of the quote unquote delusion. So it's like there's definitely something on the more supernatural side. I think even Kurt's starting to believe. Kristen wasn't there to really fully see that, but there was a whole conversation about like, oh, your daughters are going to get buried, which that's another side of this story. The fact of the matter is, you have the girls having this little Halloween slumber party, essentially. Some friends had come over, and then another girl, her name was God, what was the little girl's name who she's supposed to be? I forgot. But nevertheless, she shows up with the mask and everything. She's like, oh, I'm not going to take off the mask. I was almost halfway expecting her to end up being a little girl from last episode, Rose 390. I was almost halfway expecting it to be same kid. Because it is kind of interesting that her daughters kind of get wrapped up in the supernatural world, but more specifically connected to, you know, it's like supernatural kids, which like playing up that angle of like, you know, that's always the thing about like scary supernatural stuff. It's like when you add in the whole kid element, that's always like, yeah, you add in creepy little kids to a horror situation, it just gets 10 times scary. That's kind of like the thing. And she's telling this story of like, oh yeah, this girl, she did this bad thing. Her parents locked her in a room and set them on fire, and she tried to squeeze out through the bars, and she did manage to do so, but she was heavily burned. And they're like, yeah, and what else? And it's like, no, that's it. It's like, well, no, she's supposed to become a ghost or something like that. And it's like, you know what? Let's play another game. Go down to the basement. It's like, okay, so if you were to murder your mother, how would you do it? I'm like, Jesus. And it's like, Laura says, I'd kill her with kisses. It's like, oh, that's so adorable. That's not how you play the game. I was like, oh, shit. And then, like, some of them actually start being like, oh, you probably stab her. I was like, Jesus, poison her. We're like, okay, this is getting way out of hand here, because this is a twisted game. And it's also, oh, I found a place you can bury the body. And here there's a hole. Oh, what if their cats were in there? Yeah, but they'd probably be dead. But if they're alive, they need someone to save them. So one of the daughters was like, no, I'm good. I'm not going. I'm gonna go tell grandma what's up. So that whole situation, and she goes to, she doesn't. I guess because she doesn't want to be a party pooper, so she doesn't warn the grandma necessarily. But what ends up happening is she's on the phone with Leland, which that's a twist. Like, of course she's going to run into Leland. Leland's kind of worming his way. I guess he's trying to strike at Kristen from different points. It's like, oh, I get close to your get close to your mother, and that'd be my way to get close to you and your daughter. Well, that's definitely going to be interesting. I was wondering, was she going to drop it early on to be like, oh yeah, I met this lovely guy named Leland, and then Kristen be like, what did he look like, But that's probably not going to be something until much, much later on. I'm curious to see how soon they're going to tackle that circumstance of like, oh, Leland's kind of worming his way into your mom's life. And he did kind of tell some like dark jokes and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, my date didn't show up because she was in a car accident. It's almost like, oh, it's so befitting of like, oh, like life is kind of putting this all in our way. Almost trying to say like it's fate and destiny. I felt bad for her date who was hiccuping so much. I was like, oh, poor bastard. She tries to scare the hiccups out of him or whatever. But yeah, that was interesting. But the sad thing is she's so happy because she's like, oh, like I'm not drunk. I'm up here. I'm so happy and stuff, So it's like, oh, like they hit it off. But obviously Leland was on the phone with her being like, oh, no, don't answer the phone. Nah, come on, you don't have to. Brenda, I just remembered the little girl's name. But it's like, oh, Brenda's mom. It ended up being Brenda's mom. And like, yeah, Brenda's not over. I was like, I knew that kid wasn't Brenda. I just knew it. I was like, I was like, you just assumed it was Brenda, didn't you? And it's like, she probably said she was, but it's like, well, because the thing is, they probably did, because obviously she went out of her way not to show her face. She kept the mask on because she was trying to hide the fact that she wasn't Brenda, because they went to school with Brenda. They didn't know her that much. It's like, she's kind of weird, but the fact is, that's, the reason, so they're probably like, this is just her being, further weird or whatever, but Leland was trying to get her not to answer the phone to find out about Brenda. I was like, yeah, like he's definitely got his role to play in all of this. But luckily, she answered the phone. She calls up Kristen about it. And there's a cemetery. I was actually scared for Laura the most. Laura, there's almost a part of me under these horror circumstances naming the youngest Laura makes me go, you can't. My mind just immediately goes to Laura Palmer, Twin Peaks. That's just, that's why I said Laura the way I did. But nevertheless, I was worried about her heart condition, especially if they were going to put her in the grave and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that can't be good. Because that's what I thought, because they made a point to bring up her heart condition again earlier this episode. I thought like, oh my God, that's going to play into it. But it's like, no. And then Brenda keeps telling her story about like, oh yeah, the girl being so disfigured that she can only come out on Halloween because any other time she'll have to wear a mask. But like, on Halloween, she can go out because everyone probably thinks it's all fake or whatnot. Pulls off the mask. Luckily, Kristen, her mom, show up in time. The girls are all freaking out. It's like, oh, Brenda, she brought us out here. It's like, wait, where did Brenda go? And we see the mask tumbling. I was like, oh, is that all we're going to get? It's like, no, she's walking down the street and some kids see her face and she's like, boo. So they probably don't think much of it either. But that's like, I was wondering, are we going to get to see her face? And it's like, no. And she's laughing demonically and stuff. It's like, dude, that's crazy that like to see things like that. It's just, and leave things literally unanswered. That's literally the last shot of the episode. And it's just kind of like, what the hell was that? It was something demonic. Most likely we did like, and I thought it was kind of neat that it's one of those things of like, do you ever show the monster or not? And they didn't show her face. Only the kids saw. It's like, man, that's super disturbing. So there's that. Kind of going on a more lighthearted note, to a certain extent, is everything with Ben. I love that Ben's basically on a ghost hunting show, and he's just being like, yeah, they got the camera on him. It's like, oh, he's a skeptic. It's like, yeah, all of this is bullshit. It's all fake. It's all lies. It's like, yep. So that's how you really feel. And he's like, yep. He's like, you're not going to actually use any of that, are you? And she's like, we're going to use that, yep. Everything else, no, it's getting scrapped. So I love that. But yeah, basically he doesn't believe in anything. And then him and Vanessa kind of have that heart to heart. I thought was kind of nice. It's like, she's like, yeah, 95% is us, but like 5%, I've seen some stuff I can't explain. Haven't you? And he's like, he finally opens up about the thing from episode 2, the spirit. It's like, oh, was it an angel or something? He's like, I don't know. It just, And it's really interesting because we kind of understand Ben a little bit more. In a day and age where so much can be manipulated to kind of basically feed conspiracies and superstitions, he doesn't like that. I'm curious, like, what's the root of that? Like, because once again, I chalk it up to maybe a thing of like someone he cared about, maybe like his mom or whatever, like rather than someone giving her the actual medical, like, you know, attention she needed. Maybe it was a circumstance that his dad or whatever believed so much and was very superstitious and religious and kind of wanted to take a different route to healing. That's kind of my understanding, but it's just because it seems like his deep root of like, I don't like things that's going to perpetuate something like some falsity. It's like for him, he wants the truth, so that's why he's so quick to like try and discern that like no, all this is BS. But that's the one thing he can't shake because it's the one thing he can't explain, because all it does is going to further like more beliefs in, you know, conspiracies as well as miracles and stuff like that. But obviously Vanessa stops him to be like, oh, we should talk about this some other time. I'm like, what the hell is that all about? But it's like, oh, because they're mic'd up and she didn't want him to kind of be super vulnerable when knowing that this is going to be used. It's like, no, he's really opening up to me. No, I'm not going to go do him like that. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat for her. But then like, hey, they see a ghost and he's like, are you messing with me? She's like, no, what the hell is up with that? Then later on, everyone's noses start bleeding. But then, you know, Ben, being the skeptic idiot and very good at being the skeptic, ends up figuring out like, oh yeah, it was a projector and stuff like that. It was a pretty good rig hidden behind a wall and stuff like that. But it also turns out the same stuff that he's mixing, people can have an allergic reaction to it. So hence the bloody noses. Because Vanessa was like, no, there's no cameras around. We're not being filmed. But it's like, no, that D-bag was filming them. And he's actually the reason why everyone was getting a bloody nose. So she was kind of pissed. So I wonder if she's still going to keep working with them. I'm assuming because it's probably like, you probably get paid good enough amount of money. She's pretty much the skeptic of their team too. It is interesting how it does kind of reflect the dynamic of, you know, obviously our main group of David, Ben, and Kristen, but obviously a little more modified in certain regards. But it is nice to see that Vanessa and, you know, Ben kind of hit it off. It's like, oh, should we kind of tweet each other again? It's like, nah, she writes down in front of him. It's like, yo, Ben. So something good came out about all of that. But like I said, I'm so curious to know what Ben's thoughts on everything that went down this episode would have been. It's like, you know, and even that moment of like David going out after the exorcism and everything, the light near him explodes and cuts off, and right above him is the 3 stars. I don't know if he noticed that the 3 stars were above him or was supposed to just be something we as the audience see, but that's a lot. That's like, ooh, dude, this, I don't know, like, this show just gets spookier. Like I said, I can't praise it enough for being so spooky like that, because I just wouldn't expect that, once again, from CBS. I feel so shitty for saying that, but it just kind of throws me for a loop. And I feel like the show does a very good job without having to go, like, it doesn't have to get super gory or whatever to be creepy. Like that, you know, it really lends itself to that creepy horror element, that kind of like, oh, that uneasiness, like, you know, everything, especially everything with quote unquote Brenda this episode was the most unsettling stuff. Once again, you take a horror element and you add kids, it gets even creepier. Because it's even sadder too, because she's bringing along these other kids, so it's just like, it was more so to scare them, but I mean, who knows what her other intentions would have been if Kristen and her mom hadn't gotten there. And, you know, I'm curious, you know, so I am very, very interested to see where things kind of go going forward. Because obviously it's interesting too, because this situation is, once again, this is something they got assessed like 3 months ago. That's before Kristen started working with them. So there might be other cases that might kind of circle back around. Maybe this might be a one-time thing, maybe not. It's also interesting too, because we aren't 100% dealing with everything that went down last episode, but they're probably kind of almost sectioned off in certain regards, like, you know, it's almost like an episodical thing in certain regards where certain elements carry over, but who knows how much time has passed between last episode and this episode. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, was last week's episode the Rose 390 episode? It might have been. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was, but regardless, I am very, very interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good